the rest, and hopefully hopefully it will be meaningful for you guys. And if any of you have any questions along the way, and we'll have questions at the end, but I'm also like really happy to answer questions in the beginning and the middle also. So if you just do your like hand icon, then I'll know you want to ask something, or you can just wave your hand, whatever feels good, and we can keep it loose. You know, it just I'm really interested in what you guys are thinking and what you're reacting to. So any questions, I appreciate it. So where should I start? I grew up in New York City on 79th Street and Broadway. If you guys know it, I know you're all on the New York side of the coast. So, and I didn't grow up keeping Shabbos or keeping kosher or anything like that. I grew up in a Reform family that was very proudly Jewish, but we just, I mean, we just didn't have sort of like the more classic observances and things like that. And so anyway, I was trying to remember what my first memory of God was. And I think it was when I was 6 years old. I remember someone telling me that when you burp, you're supposed to say, "Excuse me." And I remember that night, I was all by myself in like this giant pink kitchen, right on 79th Street. And I burped and I didn't know what to do because no one was in the room. So I was like, am I supposed to say, "Excuse me"? I don't know. And then I thought to myself, oh, well, God is here. And so I said, "Excuse me." And I'm not exactly sure like where I got that awareness from. And then I was thinking about it some more. And I remembered that before I went to bed at night, my mom used to sit on my bed and say, Shema Yisrael with me. And that really gets into your bones, you know? So I don't know if you grew up saying Shema before you go to bed, but it's a really beautiful thing. And I'll just tell you just a historical kind of like note, which is, I think is kind of interesting. It's kind of sad, but it's also kind of striking, which is that in World War II, among the like zillions of tragedies, some parents, they had to, in order to save their children's life, their young children's life, they had to leave them with like non-Jewish neighbors. And they didn't think they would survive necessarily, the parents, but maybe their children could survive. And this was their best chance at, you know, letting them live. So after the war, there was an effort for people to go back and try to find these children. And as you can imagine, these children were so young when they were, you know, left with these other families. Many of them were. Many of them were raised in convents and things like that. And they had no idea that they were Jewish anymore. And so how are you going to rescue these children? And so this is the technique that they would do. These people would come and they would stand before the classroom and they would yell, Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And the children who sort of like reacted, like they knew that those were the Jewish children. And they saved many Jewish children that way. And that's something, and it's just sort of like this kind of, this affirmation, this kind of testimony that like when you say Shema before you go to bed, that it kind of gets into your bones, even if you're a little kid. So maybe that's where I got my initial awareness from. I don't really know. But anyway, I kind of want to tell you two stories at the same time. This is sort of like my kind of my Jewish journey story, but also my becoming a writer story. So a lot of people ask me, you know, I wrote, I don't know if you guys heard this already, but I wrote for The Simpsons and won an Emmy Award for The Simpsons. And I don't know if you're familiar with this show called Third Rock from the Sun, but I wrote for that too and won a Golden Globe Award for that show. And so people ask me like, oh, you probably wanted to be a writer your whole life. And it's like, I never wanted to be a writer. That just was something that kind of snuck up on me. And so here's the story of how I became a writer, okay? So I had just finished my freshman year at Harvard. And I heard two people talking. And one person says to the other, what are you doing this summer? And one person says, oh, I'm going to go like backpacking in Asia, something like that. And the other person says, oh, I'm going to do this, banking internship for some fancy bank. And I remember thinking, oh, I didn't know you had to do something fancy, like, on your summer vacation. I thought like just getting into this place was like enough. So I called my mom and I was like, Mom, what am I going to do for my summer vacation? And she said, well, I could. Now remember, I grew up on 79th and Broadway. She said, I could talk to the superintendent and you could be the elevator man in the building. And I'm like, make the call. So she calls me right back and she says, you got the job. And I was like, yes. So here's the thing. I got into two schools. I got into my state school in Harvard and every other school rejected me. I know I was waitlisted at University of Virginia. And here's my favorite one. I was made an alternate for deferred admission at Duke. I'm still trying to figure out what that means. And I know any day now, the letter from Duke can arrive. It's like, I'm this close. I am this close to getting into Duke. So anyway, I felt sort of bad for Harvard for letting me in. So because I didn't really read like many books or any books and just kind of like winged it. And I felt like I owed it to them to like read some of these classic books that I imagined all my classmates had read. So being an elevator man was this perfect opportunity. The elevators that are like this, have you seen those? So mine was like this. I just like press buttons. So it didn't take a lot of brain power, but it allowed me to sort of like start to read a lot of like the great books that I imagine like everyone's read, or at least my classmates had. And then something amazing happened. I started reading these books, and I know this will sound kind of corny and unlikely, but I found myself actually putting the books down because I was reading sentences where I was like gasping at their beauty. So I experienced something like a calling, and I was like, I want to be a writer, So I know I was reading the great works of literature, and now I was going to write jokes for Bart Simpson, but I get the irony there, you don't have to point it out, but nonetheless, it just sort of like sent me unexpectedly toward this field of writing. And around that time, I got on the humor magazine at college, which was the Lampoon. And so when I graduated, or toward the end of my senior year, I was in this really awkward position. Oh, by the way, I took the elevator man job again, sophomore year in the summer and junior year in the summer. And no one wanted to hire me when I graduated. So after I graduated, I took the elevator job again. So I really liked it though. But I found that I couldn't fill a resume. Okay. My resume was like 2/3 blank because all I had was Harvard and elevator man. And I thought at one point, because I wasn't getting any interviews anywhere. It was really very frustrating. I thought at one point, like the building that I lived in was managed by Kenton Associates. That was just the name of the company. And I thought, I should put down special intern for Kenton Associates researching problems in urban transportation. Like that, I thought, that sounds very impressive, And then I was like, okay, that is not going to end well. I am not going to do that. So anyway, I didn't do that, but I had applied for this job on this HBO show, which was kind of like an early version of the John Oliver show. It was like very kind of newsy and topical. And they gave my partner, I was writing with a partner at the time, they gave my partner and I a 3-week trial period. So that was like sort of like the big break, And so it was so high pressured, I can't even tell you. It was really like scary. And so the two of us flew out. I was 21 at the time, and they weren't so impressed after the first week of our writing. And the second week, a little more impressed. So they decided to give us a second 3-week trial period. And at the end of the second 3-week trial period, they liked us more. And so they gave us a 4-week contract. And that was my introduction to job security Hollywood style, which is to say there is none, you know? So I don't know if any of you are interested in a career in Hollywood, but it's filled with ups and downs, and you have to be prepared for that. You know, and shows get canceled, and then you got to find another job, and it's quite a, you know, anyway, if you want to find an industry that will like definitely encourage you to believe more in God, become a comedy writer, because it's sort of like, you know, you never know what the next day is going to bring. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of my writing career. And I have to say, you know, I have a theory about life. I haven't got a lot of theories about life. This may be my only theory about life, okay, that I've actually come up with, but here it is, which is when it comes to human behavior, if you can isolate something down to 2 causes, right, it's already both of them. That's my big theory. Okay, so why does someone start keeping Shabbos? So I'm just trying to introduce this next phase of my life story here. Okay, what motivates someone to do that? So there are multiple reasons. Like anyone who does something like, you know, really big in their life, like there's a lot of things that are going on at the same time, and it's just a question of whether you can put your finger on them and isolate them. So I'm going to do my best to tell you what was going on in my life as I decided to deepen my sort of commitment to Judaism and to Torah and to God and everything like that. One thing that was going on was like this sense of overwhelming thanks. I was so grateful to God, like so many like fantastic things were going on in my life, and I wanted to say thank you back to God. And I thought, you know what? Everyone is different, and everyone's got their own personal kind of language for this type of stuff. But for me, that was my way of saying thank you. But now I want to tell you something deeper, okay? Because this was also going on. And when I heard what I'm about to tell you for the first time, I thought it came from one of the great 19th century Hasidic masters. And then later on, I found out that it was said by a biker in drug rehab. Okay, so and I think that maybe that makes this an even better thought. I don't know. You can decide for yourself. But here it is. You ready? Everybody is created with a God-shaped hole inside of them. Did you hear that? Everyone's created with a God-shaped hole inside of them. And the thing is that people, like intuitively, everyone feels like there's something missing from their life. That's like a very normal sensation to have. And people don't exactly know what to do with that feeling. And so a lot of people fill it with shopping or food or career accomplishments or sex or drugs or all sorts of things, because they feel this emptiness and they're like, what's going to fill that emptiness, right? But I'm sure you've had this experience where you're doing like a jigsaw puzzle and there's one piece missing and you put the wrong piece in and you can try to like jam it in, but it's not going to fit, right? Only the right piece fits in that space. And because it's a God-shaped hole, what fits is God. God is the, you know? And so a lot of people, I find in secular society, like they're like very cynical if you want to be like more spiritual. And they're like, you know, like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, what's right with you? It's like you're actually resonating with the truth of your own existence. Now, you guys all know what a USB port is, right? So I'm going to update this teaching this way, okay? You know what that God-shaped hole is? It's a USB port that God builds into you so that you can connect with him. You understand? That's what it is. That's what it is. And then it's just a question of just how much in touch argue with that, because what God does is he creates us with this sense of longing. That's what it is. This sort of like divine homesickness is sort of like implanted in every single one of us. And then the question is, like, do we get in touch with it? Do we discover it? And so on the one hand, I was like, thank you, God, everything's going right in my life. I'm so happy. But on a deeper level, I think I was also sensing my God-shaped hole. And I was, like, I used to love to party and do absolutely insane things. I still love to do insane things, but different types of insane things, you know what I mean? And at a certain point, I was like, I'm not looking for another good time. I'm looking for transcendence. I think that was like kind of like, I don't think I could have ever put it in those words, by the way. But I think that's kind of what was going on inside of me, So anyway, I was like 24 at the time. I had been out in Hollywood for 2 years. That job had led to other jobs. So things were coming along. And I decided, okay, I'm gonna start keeping Shabbos. And so you might be wondering, like, well, was that hard to do in terms of like your work? And so I was unemployed at the time. So the answer is no, it was not hard to do at all. It was quite easy, actually. So I was keeping Shabbos for about 2 months, maybe 3 months, I don't know, something like that. And then I got a job on a sitcom, my first sitcom. Okay, I'd been on they call that John Oliver stuff, they call that Variety. Okay, so this was like a half-hour show. And this show was called Women in Prison. And if that doesn't sound funny to you, America agreed. It was ranked 99th out of 99 shows in prime time. Okay, it was literally the bottom rated show on television. But anyway, I was very happy to get the job. And so my partner and I got the job. And the first Friday night, I didn't mention anything about Shabbos just because I never kept Shabbos on a job before. So I didn't know what you're supposed to do. So it was August, Friday, Friday goes late. So first week, not too much to do. Got home, no problems. Second Friday night, it's like, we're just wrapping up, like right before Shabbos, and I lived close to the studio, but I was in one of these meetings that it's sort of like it's about to wrap up, and then someone goes, oh, and one more thing. Have you ever been in one of those meetings? I'm sure you have. And then someone goes, oh, yeah, and that reminds me. And then you never know, like, is it another 20 minutes? Is it going to end in 10 seconds? You don't know. And I'm sitting, it's like a very LA scene. I'm sitting in front of this big picture window, palm trees, and the sun, it's Friday, the sun is setting in front of my face. And I lived close to the studio, but it got to the point where it's like, if I don't leave now, I'm not going to make it home in time. And I didn't know what to do because I hadn't brought up Shabbos at all. And I was in a room full of strangers and my executive producers. And this stuff is personal. You don't want to discuss it with everybody. And what am I going to say? Like, oh, you know how God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh? Well, funny thing, because it's about to be the seventh day. Like, what am I supposed to say? So this is the only thing I could figure out to do. I stood up and I walked out of the room without saying anything. And that was it. I just left. And I was looking back on it, and I think everyone must have thought that I was going to the bathroom, but I didn't come back, So it's sort of like, do you think he's okay? It's like, and I'm like running to my car, and I'm really, it's pretty high anxiety here. And I always think of this story. There's I don't know if you've heard this speaker speak. He's really great. If you haven't heard him speak, he's really good. His name is Rabbi Mordechai Becher. Have you guys heard him? Yeah, terrific rabbi. So I heard this story from him, and it always reminds me of it. Maybe he told it to you when you heard him. So he was in Hong Kong, and they put him up. He was doing some kind of Shabbos program, and they put him up on like the 75th floor of a hotel. Did he tell you guys this story? No? Okay, so he's going up the service stairwell. And for whatever reason, he's not using the elevator on Shabbos. He's like on the 73rd floor, right? Walking. And this Asian worker comes in and looks at him, and he realizes he has to explain himself to this person. And he says, "You don't understand. It's my day of rest." So it's like, as I'm running to the car, I'm thinking, for a day of rest, I'm like really stressing out, It's like, I can't go through this every week. It's going to kill me. So I tell my partner that, I got to talk to the executive producers, explain myself to them, and then hopefully they're going to be supportive. So I go in the next week, and I said to them, I think this is the exact words I used, actually. I said, would it be okay if I left a few hours early on Friday so that I can observe the Sabbath? And the two of them looked at me and said, no, it's not okay. And had we known that you wanted to do this, we never would have hired you. And now you have to decide what you want to do, because otherwise, and they didn't complete the sentence, but friends, there's only one way to finish that sentence. There's mathematically one way to finish that sentence, which is you're fired. That's it, So they told me to think about it, and my mind was made up, but I didn't want to be confrontational with them. So I said, okay, I'll think about it, So I go back to my apartment. I call my agent. He says, what are you going to do? I said, what do you mean, what am I going to do? I'm not going to work on Shabbos. And then he said to me, if you don't work on Shabbos, you'll never work in television again. Now, I don't know if you guys know like old Hollywood movies, but have you ever heard that line, "You'll never work in this town again"? Have you ever heard that? So I remember, like, I'm on the phone and I'm like, whoa, people actually say this. And someone's saying it to me. It was bizarre. It was bizarre. I was like, well, I'm not going to work. And he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'll write movies. He said, you don't just write movies. Because TV and movies are two different fields. So I said, well, I'm not going to work. So the next day, I told my partner. Now I had a real dilemma here, because my partner wasn't even Jewish. Fabulous, fantastic person, by the way, and extremely supportive. And I was in a big bind because, how does this sound? Like the beginning of your spiritual career is, I'm going to get someone fired because my partner was about to get fired because of me. You understand? Now that's a drag. Like, I'm trying to do something good, right? And I'm going to get my partner fired? Like, that doesn't work. So what I said to him, I remember I said these words. I said to him that there's more to life than chasing a buck. I remember saying that to him. And I also remember telling him that this is something that I have to do for me. And if you want to try to stay on the show without me, I totally understand. Now, let me just give you some background here. We were co-writing pieces on the Harvard Lampoon together. So my entire professional career was with this guy, okay? 5 years. I was only 24 at the time. 5 years we had been writing together. And I said to him, and by the way, it wasn't even clear that they were going to let him stay without me because they hired us as a team. And I was also more verbal in the writer's room than he was. So it wasn't obvious that they were going to keep him and let me go, right? They'd probably fire him too. But I said to him, if you want to try to stay on the show without me, I won't hold it against you. And if they don't let you, if you try to stay on the show and they don't let you, I'll still write with you. And I said, if you end up staying on the show without me, if you ever want to write together again, I'll never hold it against you. I'll still write with you. And he said to me, I think I would like to try to stay on the show without you. And I was like, what? You know, after you give a speech like that, you want the person to say, no, my liege, wherever you go, I will follow. You know what I mean? It's like, that was not his response. But I totally am sympathetic to what he said, because he said, you know, I always would have wondered what would have happened with my career. Respect that, totally get it. It's cool, no problems. So just to recap, I was told I was going to lose my job. I was going to lose my partner that I had done all my professional writing with, and that I'd never write again in television. So probably you think I was freaking out. And the truth is, I was obviously anxious, but I wasn't freaking out. And the reason why I wasn't freaking out is because I knew nothing bad was going to happen from keeping Shabbos. You know, I might have to change careers. Absolutely. But I knew in my heart, nothing bad is going to happen from keeping Shabbos. And so my agents came in and they talked to the heads of the company and my executive producers. And I was really surprised. Behind closed doors, it turned out they were really supportive, and they said that they liked me a lot and that they wanted to keep me. And they gave me like a slightly lower title and a slightly lower salary, the two of us actually, but we had come in at a slightly inflated salary and title, because Friday night, which I didn't know, I'm glad I didn't know this at the time, was the biggest rewrite night of the whole week. I think if I had known that, I would have found that very intimidating, like knowing that to still ask, you know, to leave. So I was glad I didn't know that. But anyway, and they wanted to hire another writer to be in the room when I wasn't there, which is totally understandable. And I got to say, you know, I've mentioned a lot of kind of fancy things about myself. Told you I went to Harvard, I've got an Emmy Award, a Golden Globe Award. And the reason why I'm bringing that up again is because the story that I just told you is the proudest moment of my life. You know, I don't know if you ever heard this phrase. I don't know who said it, some famous historical figure. But if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. You know? And I got an opportunity to stand for something in my life. And that in and of itself was really meaningful for me. And let me just approach it from a slightly more emotional level. Do you guys remember, probably in high school, do you remember looking in a microscope and like you turn the thing until the slide or whatever it is comes into focus? Do you remember that feeling? Do you remember that? And do you remember like how good it felt like when you turned it and you went, ah, now it's in focus? Remember? Do you remember that? And then sometimes you turn it one more time and you go, ah, now it's really in focus. And that's kind of the way I felt at that moment, because, you know, it says in the Talmud, like, what is sort of like the idealized person? So they say that an idealized person is someone whose insides match their actions. Like if your insides and your outsides are the same, you know, like a lot of people, I mean, all of us, we have like positive thoughts and everything like that, but sometimes we're not necessarily like doing those things, like our more idealistic moments. But what about like when you've got that level of idealism within you, and then all of a sudden that's like what you're doing. So the Talmud says that that's the goal to shoot for in life. And I felt like at this moment, after that story that I just told you, I felt like I was in harmony with myself. And I felt like I was in harmony with the universe, you know? So it was big. It was big for me. And it was a turning point in my life. And now I have to tell you, no matter what's going on in my life, Friday, I could have the biggest deadline in the entire world. It's like when Shabbos comes, it's like Fortress Shabbos. It's like, you can't get me. Nobody can get me. And I'll tell you, one of the highlights of my week is when I turn off my cell phone right before Shabbos starts. It's sort of like, no, 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 you are not my master. I do not serve you, cell phone. It's like just such a nice moment turning that thing off. I can't even tell you. And, a few years after that, I got married. Someone told me, you're never going to find a wife. You're too much of a weirdo, I was like, thanks. But anyway, I did. I found a wife. So and I've got kids, and the reason why I mention that is because, like, I walk in Friday night, the house smells great, like delicious food. The table is set. The kids have had baths and they're wearing like their best clothes, and there's this energy in the air, and just this, it's so hard to be in the moment today, because, like, I don't know if there's ever been a generation with more distractions than what we have. It's just, they're relentless. They're so relentless, you probably don't even notice them, but they're relentless. And Shabbos is that time where it's kind of like, you can like unplug, and it's really nice. I'll tell you, one of my favorite teachings. So anytime there's two different words for the same thing, say in Hebrew, that means that they mean slightly different, because otherwise there wouldn't be two different words for them, okay? So you've got two different words, which means there's oneg and simcha. Okay, so I'll translate. So simcha, you can translate as joy. Oneg, you translate as bliss. Okay, so what's the difference between joy and bliss? And by the way, you've heard of like an oneg Shabbos, right? You've probably heard of that. So oneg, this word bliss is associated with Shabbos. Okay, so now listen to the difference. And this really actually was said by a great Hasidic master, the Ishbitzer Rebbe. He said, joy is when God gives you something that you didn't have before. Bliss is when God shows you what it is that you've had all along. Right? Joy is when God gives you something that you didn't have before. Bliss is when God shows you what it is that you've had all along. So that's oneg. That's oneg. And we say oneg Shabbos. So what happens on Shabbos is God gives us the eyes to see what it is that we actually have and that we've always had. Because it's kind of hard to take stock, and we have so many blessings in our lives, and we're so running and we're so busy that it's kind of hard to appreciate them. It's a beautiful thing about Shabbos. It allows you really to be in the moment for 25 hours. It's pretty cool. And I remember when I first started keeping Shabbos, there's so many rules to keeping Shabbos. I was like, I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And then at a certain point, I realized, you mean I get to do nothing? And I was so happy. It was like such a relief, And so many of us, like, we're so used to, like, between email and all the rest, we're so used to not allowing ourselves to have any time off. And if we take time off, we feel guilty about it. And one of the beautiful things about Shabbos, for me anyway, is that not only aren't you allowed to work, you can't work, and you're given eternal reward for it. So that's like, all right, that's a sweet deal. I like that. All right, well, listen, I'm going to tell you something that I think is really important. So it's a big idea, And I think that you can't actually appreciate your own life without understanding what I'm about to tell you. And I don't think that you can understand the world at all without understanding this thought. You ready? So everyone's got the same question, whether you can articulate it or not. All right? Everyone's got the same question, which is, if there's a God, why is the world so messed up? Everyone's got this question. And the answer is, the Torah has an answer, and it's a brilliant, simple, true answer. The answer is because the world isn't finished yet. That's the answer. And so imagine an architect, okay? An architect, before he builds a house, he imagines the completed house. And then he starts to build it, right? So before God created the world, God imagined a perfect world without any war or hunger or hatred or anything like that. And then he set about to build it. And that's why he created us, to be partners with him in terms of finishing the world. See, a lot of people really don't understand this idea. This is like a very, very big idea. They think, here's what they think. There was the Garden of Eden, and we ate from the tree of, like, it was perfect. It was like a cosmic spa. And then we ate from the tree of knowledge and we blew it. And for all times, we're trying to get back to zero. Like, that's all of human history. We're just trying to get back to zero. But that's not it. That's not it. Like my teacher, my Rebbe, put it this way. If the Garden of Eden was so perfect, what was the snake doing there? Did you ever wonder that? Right? So because it wasn't perfect, there was a little aspect of imperfection to it. And then our job was to finish it off, to be partners with God to finish it off. And that's still our job. That's still our job. You know, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But we're still in the process of finishing up the world. And that's the brokenness in the world. It's not that God abandoned the world, that God created a world with evil in it and he said, good enough, and went away. That's not it. So that's our mission. We got to finish the world. That's it. That's what it is. That's our job, you know? And I'll tell you one more thing, and then I'll wrap it up. And we can do questions and answers, or you can do your breakout sessions or whatever it is. You know, if you went up to, I think, like if I walked up to a lot of people in the street and I asked them, why are you Jewish? I think almost everyone would say, because my parents are Jewish. And it's sort of like, I was born, and it's like, tag, you're it, right? Like, I didn't really have much of a choice in the matter. It's like, I'm a Jew, it's what it is, you know? So, but what about the first Jews, right? What about Abraham and Sarah? Their parents weren't Jewish, and they were the first Jews. So if you ask them, why are you Jewish? And they started the whole religion, what are they going to tell you? See, what's so intriguing about that question, to me anyway, is that they're not looking back, they're looking forward. See, Judaism is actually a very radical, forward-thinking movement, because what we're thinking about is the perfection of the world. We're not just thinking about dragging the past into the present. Like, that's what most people think. I got to do this and I got to do that because my grandparents did it, or whatever it is. And it's all backwards looking. That's not it, because Abraham and Sarah weren't Jewish because their parents were Jewish, and they started it all. They were forward looking because Judaism is forward looking. We're on the front lines of perfecting the world. That's what it is. And all the previous generations are looking to us. Can you believe it? We're not afterthoughts. We think of ourselves as afterthoughts, right? We're like, everyone's looking to us. Moses, Rabbi Akiva, All the tzaddikim, all of our holy mothers are all looking to us to finish the job. Can you believe it? Okay, listen. The truth is I could go on and on and on and on. Ashley knows that. I'll tell you one more thing, and then you guys can break, because I just love this teaching. I once imagined a conversation between two fish, okay? One fish says to the other, do you believe in water? And the other fish says, I don't know if I believe in water. My grandfather was very religious. He believed in water. Okay, that's the end of the story. So what's the joke? The joke is these fish think they're such intellectuals, right? Do you? They're philosophizing. I don't know. Meanwhile, the only thing that exists is water. That's the only thing that exists. So do you understand? We're the fish. We're the fish. All that exists is God. God is the only thing that exists, by the way. You know, there's an expression in English. I don't know if you ever heard this. It's called hiding in plain sight, which means there's something so close to you, you can't see it. Not because it's so remote, it's because it's so close. That's the fish in water. That's us and God. I was having lunch with a friend of mine. I said, where did you park your car? He said, across the street. I said, do you realize you can't get to your car without swimming through godliness? Right? So that's our lives. That's our lives. And you know, the funny thing is that God is so hidden in this world, but when you know the secret, all you can see is God. When you know the secret, everywhere you look, all you see is God. All right, I think we're going to do a little question and answer. You guys are going to break up into groups. I'm not sure. I'm going to hand it off to Ashley, and she's going to give me and everyone else directions, I guess.
Yeah, so we're just going to all stay in here, and we're going to have a question and answer. If you have, if you want to ask it anonymously, you can message it to me, or you could just unmute yourself or raise your hand or anything like that, and we'll go from there.
So Dave, did you write the Bart versus Australia episode? Because that's my favorite episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people love that one. No. I was on fifth and sixth seasons, I believe, or sixth and seventh seasons. So it's been a while. Yeah, but I was not on that one. But that was right around the time when I left it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But still, it's great that you wrote for The Simpsons.
Yes. Yeah, it was quite an experience.
An icon of the 90s.
Yes, true. I see a hand raised there. Erica.
Yes. So I've kind of just been playing with this idea that humor and faith are more linked than our other emotions. You can almost how to make someone angry or sad or happy, but it's a little bit harder to formulate how to make someone laugh, because we have sense of humor in different ways.
Yes.
Sense of faith in different ways, whether it's within your religion or across religion. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the link between faith and humor. Yes,
I'll make one connection. It's a big subject. I'm sure you could say a lot of things, but let me just throw out one idea. One quality, which is a very exalted quality in Torah, is the ability to laugh and to be in a state of joy. Actually, happiness is very, very important in Torah, and when the Torah talks about happiness, which is what laughter and humor brings you to, they're not just talking about having a smile on your face, which is nice, or being in a good mood, which is also nice, but they're actually talking about something deeper, which is that when a person is in a state of joy, they have expanded consciousness. And when you have expanded consciousness, you're actually able to grasp the totality of things much better. And that leads to greater faith. One of the things that happens when people get depressed is that they have tunnel vision and they just kind of see the problem in front of them. But the opposite happens when you're in a state of joy, which humor and laughter can bring you to, where things don't bother you as much because all of a sudden you have a much grander perspective. And that can bring you to a place of greater faith as well. Because you see, like, you don't have to get bent out of shape over everything. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of get the sense that, you know, something, I survived this far in my life and I've had all sorts of problems. I guess it's not that big a deal, you know? And that kind of brings you to more of a place of faith. So anyway, that's kind of what comes to mind. So anyway.
Would you say there's like more of a connection from like having humor and that increasing your faith, or like the other way around might be equal or less or more?
Yeah, I think that if a person who has more faith is probably more apt to laugh and sort of be in a better mood as well. So I think they are mutually reinforcing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Jordan.
Oh yeah. Hi, David. I really enjoyed hearing your whole story, especially with finding the work-life balance with celebrating Shabbat and your work. And that's actually something that has come up in my own career. But I guess I wanted to ask, besides that own experience, was there a moment in your life where you felt the most spiritual or connected with yourself?
Did I have an experience where okay, well, you know something, that's a hard question because I've had so many. But let me tell you something that just happened to me last week. Maybe Ashley heard this story, I don't know, but this is something crazy. This is a crazy story. You ready for a crazy story? So I flew in last week. So like, not this past Shabbos, like 2 days ago, but the previous one. I took the red eye. I came straight from my Purim Suda went to the airport, you know, took an Uber to the airport. And anyway, I was going to Muncie. I have a friend in Muncie and his son was getting bar mitzvah and he's one of my best friends. So I wanted to fly in for it. So listen to this story. My friend lived like a 6-minute drive from where I was, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that. I didn't know where it was. So I plug in I tell the Uber guy, I get into the car and he says, 20 Piamenta Lane. And I said, no, 20 Pomona Lane. He goes, oh, okay. So he drives and I had been up, it was the red eye, so I was exhausted. And I fall asleep and I wake up a half an hour later in another county, okay? And he says, we're here. And my friend lives like in the middle of the woods. And I look up and it's like, we're on this suburban block. It's like obviously the wrong place. And I'm like, no, he said 20 Piamenta Lane. I said, no, 20 Pomona Lane. He goes, oh. So I asked him to turn around. We turn around. We're in this, just like I said, suburban street. We go like a block and a half or so. And then we get to the main road of the town, and I see a sign that says Valhalla Cemetery. He had driven me to where my parents are buried. I was like, you drove me to my parents' grave. He said, and he's driving. I said, stop the car. He said, and he's still driving. I said, stop the car. He stops the car right on train tracks. I was like, what are you doing? We're on train tracks. Go. He said, you said, stop the car. I said, go. Then he goes and I said, okay, stop the car. So I told him, go into the cemetery. So we go into the cemetery. I knew generally, I hadn't been there for years. I knew generally where they were. I'm standing there. I don't know exactly where their grave is. I call the front office, which is, like half a mile away or something. Tell them my parents' names. They look it up on a map. And we're just talking on the phone. And they said, okay, tell me a name that you see. I said, I see like a tombstone. I'm reading a name off a tombstone, Mishkin. She says, okay, which Mishkin? So now I look on the ground because there's the headstone, whatever, the footstone, whatever. They said, Sadie. She goes, okay, Sadie Mishkin. Okay, take a right. So I'm like, just start walking. And she says, now what name do you see? And I tell her, and she's giving me directions by the names of the dead. Do you understand? Like how freaky this is? And then I get to my parents' tombstone. Now, it was like a waking dream. And this phrase came to me when I was trying to explain it to someone. And it's kind of stayed with me, which is the impossible happens in real time. Okay, the impossible happens in real time. And I thought to myself later, like, this is how it's going to be when Mashiach comes. You know, because I felt like I knew this was happening, but I couldn't believe that it was happening. It was like a waking dream, but I knew it was reality. And I thought to myself, that's the way it's going to be. We're going to hear a noise outside, and we're going to think it's a car alarm or, you know, construction. What is that noise? What's that noise? You know, going to step outside, and it's going to be the great shofar blast of Mashiach. We're going to go, like a moment ago, we were going to be doing an email or drinking some coffee, and then we're just going to step into this, seamlessly step into this next stage of reality. And yeah, I mean, there's more to the story, but that just happened to me, you know?
Incredible story.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. I see another hand there. Carly.
Yeah. Could you tell us like a little bit like what it was like writing for The Simpsons, like collaborating with people, and like did you write your own stuff, or were you kind of given like guidelines, or like how were you inspired by it?
Yeah, so when I was on there, it was very much written in the room. The episodes were written in the room. So you had the head writer, who was the executive producer, and there were about, I don't know, about 11 of us in the room. And we just go line by line. And this was at a time when, you know, you had VCRs. So, you know, this is a while ago. But the reason why I bring that up was that there were some jokes which would be like sign jokes. It would be like just something funny written on a sign in the background. And the only way you could read that joke is if you freeze framed it, right? Mm-hmm. And you had 11 people working for maybe 20 minutes coming up with that line, what was going to be on the sign. I mean, I don't think we spent less than 20 minutes per line, 11 people, you know? And it was really amazing, just how much work went into every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And it was also very high pressured, and it wasn't really the way I personally enjoy working, because I really like to brainstorm, and there was very little to no brainstorming in the writer's room. People were just thinking of like the setup and then the payoff of the joke all inside their head without talking. It was almost like being in a humor laboratory, which is not the way I work. And so it wasn't the most fun experience for me, honestly, but I learned a lot, and I was, you know, to this day, I'm very proud that I was able to be on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yulia.
Hi. So this question probably is not one you can answer in like a couple minutes, but when you said, you know, why do bad things happen? It's because the world isn't finished yet, and it's sort of our job to finish it. I guess I was wondering, number one, what does that mean to be finished? Like, what does the world look like when it's finished? And number two, like, is that something we will ever be able to see? Like, is it realistic?
Yeah. It's built into the world from the beginning of creation. So so yeah, the seeds have been planted. I'll give you an example of it. The Zohar, sort of our mystical text, says something very interesting about the Torah itself. It says that the Torah is the blueprint of creation. Okay. And so the very first letter of the Torah, the letter Beis of Breshis, right, is like, that's in the beginning, right? So the very first letter is like, so to speak, your entryway into this reality, if this is the blueprint of reality, right? So Beis, interestingly, is the number 2, because every letter has a numerical thing. But there's something that a lot of people don't know, which is if there's a large letter, and this is a large letter Beis. By the way, just for your kind of Jewish literacy 101, just something interesting to know, that throughout the Torah, every single letter of the Aleph Beis appears in one place in a larger format and in a smaller format. Isn't that interesting? Like over Tanakh, over all the holy books. So this is the large letter Beis. Whenever you have a large letter, it's 4 times the normal gematria, 4 times the normal number. So that means that the first number of the Torah, the first letter of the Torah, is kind of 2 numbers simultaneously. It's 2 because it's Beis, but it's also 8. Do you get that?
Yeah.
So 2 is like a great description of this world. Why? Because you have heaven and earth. You have good and evil. You have male and female. You have the spiritual and the material. You have the revealed and the hidden. Like these are all, you have the written law and the oral law. You have, like, the number 2 absolutely describes this entire existence that we're in. Okay? Interesting. But here's the deeper point. Because it's a large letter Beis, and again, this is the blueprint of reality, and this is the entrance to the blueprint of reality, the first letter. The letter Beis is also the number 8. You know, 7 is the number that stands for this world, because the world was created in 7 days. So 7 is really the number that means the natural order. And 8 is one beyond. 8 means the supernatural order. Do you get it? Because 8 is one beyond 7. Do you understand that on a symbolic level?
I mean, what if it was like 50? Would that be
So
considered
50,
supernatural?
you know, there's a whole, Torah is so deep. Every number has a language to it. 50, by the way, is a very significant number that you just mentioned, because it says that there are 50 gates of heaven, and 50 is considered the top of heaven. So it's interesting because you just threw out the number 50 without thinking, but there's a correlation between 50 and 8, by the way. But anyway, this is all rich, and this is thousands of years worth of wisdom that I'm just kind of throwing at you, like in a very casual way right now. but anyway, the point is like Hanukkah is 8 days, right? Why is Hanukkah 8 days? Because it's talking about a miracle. Okay? So 7 is this world, 8 is beyond this world. So the first letter is really describing this world. It's 2, which is the natural order, heaven and earth, physical and spiritual, good and evil, right? But it's also the number 8 because it's a large base, which is 4 times 2, which is 8. Meaning to say, right at the beginning of creation, God implanted the supernatural order to coexist alongside the natural order in the world from the very outset. Do you hear the point?
Yes.
In other words, it's not like there's a natural order and then one day we're hoping that something totally surprising and out of the ordinary is going to happen. That's not what's going on. That end was planted into creation from the very, very beginning. Do you ever wonder, like my Rebbe, my teacher, said something, it sounds so simple, but it's really deep. He said, the world doesn't work on a 1 + 1 = 2 level. Have you ever thought something in your life was absolutely going to happen and it didn't happen? Did you ever think something absolutely wasn't going to happen and it did happen? All of us. You know why? Because the world doesn't work in a 1 + 1 = 2 way. Because there's the natural order and there's the supernatural order, and they coexist. And they're both implanted into the world. And in the end of days, what's going to happen is that that end result, which was planted there from the very beginning, is going to rise up and it's going to blossom. You know, I'll tell you something freaky. We believe, and what I'm about to tell you right now is not an extra credit Jewish thought. This is what I'm telling you right now is normative Judaism. We believe in the mass resurrection of the dead. We call it Techiyas HaMesim. And believe it or not, when you daven Shmona Esrei, the Amida prayer, look at the second blessing. Every time you daven the Amida prayer, you're talking about the resurrection of the dead. It's planted in there. This is like a very big idea, because the idea is like this. We believe, Judaism believes in evolution more than Darwin did. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Darwin posited a single cell organism and said that complex human beings came from this single cell, right? That's what Darwin says. We say the world and humanity is still evolving.
So when it's finished, will the world still exist, but in a different form maybe, or will it all be like over?
Yeah, so it's going to go through stages. It's going to go through stages. And when Mashiach comes, that's going to be one stage. And then Techiyas HaMesim is going to be the next stage. And basically what's going to happen is that, yeah, for sure there's going to be peace. There's not going to be war. There's not going to be hunger. There's not going to be any obstacles to serving God. There's going to be clarity. There's going to be like just the nature of the world is going to become really crystalline and really super refined and spiritual. But we're still going to exist in our bodies, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everything
So
externally will be different then, but we won't be different.
well, I guess everything will be different in that we won't like, it will kind of be like the Garden of Eden, basically, but probably even more amazing than that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Does anyone else have a question or complaint?
Oh, I just had a comment.
Yes, please. What's your name?
My name's also David.
Hi, David.
So you were talking about how the world isn't perfect and how there's like lack of beauty in the world because it's still evolving.
Well,
I'm not sure.
not lack of beauty. There's tons of beauty, but a lot of brokenness.
Well, actually, I need to elaborate. Well, because I'm not sure where I heard this, but I realized beauty can only exist with a lack of beauty to contrast it to.
Oh no, there's no shortage of beauty in the world.
But I'm saying you can only appreciate going outside, the sun is shining when you go out and it's storming. It gives you something to compare it to. And I think that's why there's some injustices in the world.
Yeah, like we wouldn't be able to appreciate any good if all that existed was good. In fact, the way the Talmud puts it is, it would be like a lamp in daylight. That's how they put it. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, does anyone else have a question? If not, I have a final question. Or if anyone thinks of one, that you can also raise your hand. So the title was Making God Your Best Friend. So I guess my question is, like, do you have a tip for like what we should take with us, like as we, go
Yes,
throughout.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. How do you make a friend? How do you make a friend? So have you ever had this experience? You go to a party or some event, whatever it is, and you meet someone and it's like you say something and then they say something and then you have this in common and then they have that in common and then you want to hear more about this and then they want to hear more about that and you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then you go back to your house and you go, I think I just made a new friend. And so here's the question. How did you make that new friend? And the answer is by talking. Now that might not sound like headline news, but it is headline news. You make friends by talking. Okay? So now let's apply that to God, because this is a major breakthrough idea that I'm telling you right now. How do you make God your best friend? By talking to God. You see, now I'm going to tell you something. I want you to listen very carefully right now. A lot of people confuse praying and talking. Now, let me tell you why that's so terrible. Because most people don't like praying. They're like, why am I reading these words out of a book that don't mean anything to me? Like, I don't like praying. So, but that's when they think they're talking to God, but they're not talking to God. That's praying, not talking. So what that means is, listen carefully, because this is going to be a very devastating conclusion. That means that there are a lot of people who have actually never had a conversation with God in their entire life. Because they think that the time to talk to God is when I'm praying, and praying is actually the opposite of talking. So the answer is, talking to God is like the most amazing thing in the world. So let me give you an example. There's an after blessing that you say, let's say you drink a can of soda or something like that. So there's a blessing that you say before and a blessing that you say after. And one time I had a drink and I said the after blessing, right? Which didn't mean anything to me. I just kind of rattled it off. And then, I don't know, I was sitting in my car by myself. I don't know why I did this. I just said, God, that was so good. Thank you so much. I really like that. And it's like all the lights went on. It was like literally like a turning point in my life. And so that's the thing. Talking to God creates that relationship. Like next time you are happy about something, like next time you have like a hamburger or something like that that you like, say, God, that was a really good hamburger. Thank you so much. Or next time you like walk out in the street and it's like a nice day or it's stormy or whatever it is, you go, oh, it's so pretty. God, thank you. I love this day. It's the breeze. It feels so good. Thank you, God. Or something, next time something's bothering you, you walk down the street, whatever it is, go, God, this guy's really giving me a hard time. What should I do about this person? What am I going to do? And that, what I'm telling you might sound very simple, but I am telling you something absolutely life-changing right now. Absolutely life-changing. That if you talk to God like he's your best friend, because that's what Rebbe Nachman of Breslov says. He was one of the greatest Hasidic masters. He says, talk to God like he's your best friend. If you talk to God like he's your best friend, your whole life changes. Because all of a sudden, you see, for so many people, God is an idea instead of a reality. But we exist within God. God is actually the reality of the universe. But how do you make that real inside your life? And the answer is by talking to God. That's the answer, by talking to God. And it doesn't have to be important stuff. Just, oh, I can't believe it, God, I left my notebook in the house. I gotta go back and get my notebook. Why did I do that? Try it. I promise you it will change your life. I promise you it will change your life. Because you're going to make the ultimate reality of the world real to you instead of it just being an idea. That is the secret. And not just talking to God, talking to him like he's your best friend. Yeah. That's
All right. Thank you. Thank you
Sure.
so much. That was so
Thank you
amazing
so
and
much,
interesting.
David.
Yeah.
Can I just share one observation? I'm Robert.
Sure, please go ahead.
But I was just thinking, as you said, about how it worked in The Simpsons, where 11 of you were sitting around a room and you were thinking about not just the regular jokes in the storyline, but the things on the wall, which you could only see if you freeze framed the VCR.
Right.
And as you were thinking that, I'm thinking, wow, what about someone, what if you have 22 people or 100 people? Or what if you had the most ingenious being in the entire universe putting things in there to give you messages? Like, what is there in the Torah, like that we are there? And this is really the Kabbalah and what it talks about and what it delves into. But how much more so would a creator who wants to have a relationship with his creations put stuff in there so that only if you really want to know it, you can understand it? That's just what I was going through my mind when you were saying that.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, it's the Torah's, I like to refer to the Torah as the infinite compressed into the finite, you know? It's like, it's all there. So I'll just give an advertisement. Ashley mentioned it at the beginning, but I'll just say it one more time, which is that I do a podcast every Sunday. It's called Spiritual Tools for an Outrageous World. And if you Google that, you'll see there's lots and lots of talks on all sorts of subjects. If you want to hear me driven to my parents' grave, that's the latest podcast. You can hear that story with some more details in it. But I post one every Sunday, and I give the podcast over a Zoom call, and then we have questions and answers and like a nice group discussion after the podcast. So if anyone ever wants to take part in that, yeah, check it out. Check it out. It would be fun to have you. And thank you just for giving me this opportunity to connect with you all.
Thank you so much for
you so
taking
much.
the time.
Yeah,
Thank you, David. Awesome.
absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for listening.
You're welcome, Mati.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so if anyone wants to stick around, we will do a quick trivia, not trivia, but a prize giveaway. So just gonna share my screen, and whoever made it this far, you get you get to be part of this. So okay, hold on, the music's a bit loud. All right, rewarded for sticking around till 9:18. Okay, here we go. Good. Very close.
Oh,
stuck
wow.
around.
Michael B. There you go. So you guys are sticking around.
Congrats,
Okay.
congrats. I'll be in touch. I'll be in touch about a prize. Okay, and we have one more winner. Let's see what we got. Al Guberman.
Nice.
Congrats,
Congrats, Al.
guys.
Okay. Very exciting. No doubt. No doubt. Okay. That was awesome. Okay. Both
Okay.
Davids are such happy people.
Speaking. Okay, thank you guys for being here. If you need help finding his podcast or anything like that, you can reach out to me. Okay, oh right, there's a link in the email. I'll send a link out. And have a nice week, everyone.
A great week.
Amazing.
Thank
Great
you.
week, everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.